Hello everyone and welcome back. In this video we're going to spend some time refactoring our routes. Now as of right now I'm looking at app.js and it's getting pretty long and cumbersome. It's already 106 lines and it's got a lot of these different routes in there, and it's difficult sometimes to kind of manage when you're looking through it trying to find the exact route you want. Want to make sure, okay, this one goes to comics, this one's comments, so on and so forth. What we are going to do is we're going to break these routes into their own files and then just import them into app.js to make sure our app.js stays as clean as possible. This is going to be similar to like we did the models, where at first we put them in app.js, but then we broke them out into their own directory right here. We're going to do the same thing with our routes. Looking at our routes, there are three separate sections of routes. Right now we have our landing page, which is kind of its own thing. We have our comic routes, which is all of our routes related to comics. And then we have our comment routes, which are all of our routes. Right now just two, but there will be more related to comments. So what we're going to do is we're going to create three separate files. We're going to create one for comments, one for comics, and one for everything else. I like to call this one main. Some people call it index. You could call it miscellaneous. It could be anything like that. So we're going to go ahead and make a directory called routes. Inside of there, we're going to touch routes/main.js. routes/comics.js, and again, don't use comics, use whatever yours is, and then routes/comments.js. So inside of routes, we now have those three files. And one thing to note is this naming is a convention, it's not a requirement. You could call it something else, you could call it comic routes or comment routes or whatever. This is just a convention. I recommend sticking with it, but it's not required. And then basically what we're going to do is we're going to cut all this stuff out of here and paste it into these. So let's do the comics one first. Inside of app.js, we're going to get our comic routes. Let's get all of them. Scroll down until we get to the end of the comics. And then we're going to cut them and paste them in here. So now we have all of our routes in there. And remember, we have to, whenever we're importing things and exporting things, we have to do our module.exports equals, and we don't know what this is yet. We don't know what we're actually exporting, because are we exporting app? Are we exporting routes? What do we do? Well, Express gives us a cool little tool called router that we can use to do this. So at the top, we still have to import Express. Const express equals require express. And then router, which is what we're going to use for routing, is const router equals express.router, called as a function. And I put a hyphen instead of an equal sign. So just like back here in our app.js, how we have app is express called as a function, express.router gives us the router. So then instead of app, we want router.get. Router.post. Basically, we're updating all of these for router. So all of our routes have been attached to router instead of app, because app doesn't exist in this file. And then you guessed it, router is what we are module.exporting. So let's save this file. And then over here in app.js, we have to actually import that file. And I'm going to take this time to clean up our imports a little bit. We have, at the top, it's going to be our npm imports. And then we're going to have our config import. Then we're going to have our route imports. And then finally, we're going to have our model imports. So I'm going to move my mongoose import up here to npm. Got config, got route, got models. Okay, excellent. So we're going to import our route, const, and we'll call this comic routes equals require ./routes/comics. And again, I got this just because I'm in the Yelp Comics, or app is running in the Yelp Comics directory. Then it goes into routes and gets the comics.js file. But this still isn't going to work. So if I run this, no daemon, let's try and go to a comic route. Cannot get /comics. The reason is that we're importing our routes, but we're not actually using them. We're not doing anything with them. So down here, I'm going to do it right before the listen. And this is just my choice. This is not something you have to do. We're going to use routes app.use comic routes. Save. This will restart. Now let's try it again. Comic is not defined. Uh-oh. This is exactly as expected. The reason for this, and just think about it for a second, we know comic's defined. Comic's right here. I'm looking at it. What's wrong with it? It's because we're using comic in here in our routes, but we're never importing it. So inside of our routes right now, we're trying to find comic, but this file doesn't know anything about comic, so we have to import it here too. Const comic equals require, and then we got to find it. Right now we're inside of routes, so we have to go up a level to get into the main directory. Up a level /models /comic. Now let's save. Our server will refresh. We'll restart rather. And let's refresh this page. There we go. It's working again. Exactly like we want. Now it is time for a challenge. What I would like you to do is to complete the comments and the main.js route files using this one as a guide, if you will. I want you to complete the comments.js and the main.js. Inside of comments, I want both of those comment routes that we created right here, these two, app.get /comics ID comments new, and post comics ID comments. So you want both of those inside of your comments route. And then for the main, the only one there is going to be our landing page that has just been hanging around with us and we haven't really touched since we first set our project up. I promise we're going to get to this and it's going to look a lot better than it does now. But for now, just go ahead and refactor that into main.js. Make sure that you import them up here under your route imports once you're done, and also make sure that you use them down here in your use routes. Test them all, make sure they are working, and then push play. All right, I hope that went well. Let's go ahead and get started. Let's do the comments one first. Using comics.js as a guide, we know that we're going to have to import express and router, so let's go ahead and do that. And we know that we're going to have to do module.exports router, so let's do that as well. And then all we have to do is inside of here, get our comment routes, cut them out, paste them in, update app to router, save, and then we have to import them and use them. So route imports, const comment routes, and this name again is just made up. You can do whatever you want. Require .routes/comments, and then we have to actually use that. App.use comment routes. Save and refresh, and let's try it. So if we wanted to come to this comic right here, and then do /comments/new, there we go. It works. And since this one works, we know the other one should as well, but let's just test it just to be certain. Submit. Uh-oh, comment is not defined. It's because we are not importing our comment inside of our comments.js. This is why we test, by the way. Const comment equals require. We've got to go out of the routes, and into models, and then into comment.js. Save. I'm just going to go back and hit submit comment again. There we go. Let's look at our terminal, make sure it worked. Yep, we got this new comment inside of Atlas. Let's click on the comments again and make sure it actually showed up. Yep, there it is, right there. So we are getting our comments, and those routes have been refactored successfully. Last one is main. That one's going to be super easy. I'm just going to get both of those, paste it in, module.exports equals router, and inside of here, cut, paste, change that to router, and we're done with that file. Now we just have to import it and use it. Const main routes equals require ./routes/main. Now at the bottom, we're going to use, I'm going to put this first, app.use main routes. And now let's come here, and instead of going to /comic, let's go to the landing page, make sure it works. Yep, there we go. So we have refactored this, and now let's look at our app.js. It is much more lean than it used to be. Instead of 80 some odd lines, it's only 34. I'm going to add a few more comments just because I'm kind of anal about that. So connect to DB, and we're going to have config. We'll have a config section.